Good evening from Wolfville and Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are joined here this evening by Dr. Jeff Hennessy, President and Vice Chancellor of Acadia, who is actually joining us from the other side of Turtle Island in Calgary, whom I will introduce shortly. My name is Una Proudfoot. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Executive Director of the Alumni Affairs Office in the Office of Advancement at Acadia. And it's a pleasure to be here with so many of you this evening, and I certainly see familiar names, and perhaps we'll see some of those familiar faces as we move on in the conversation. So just a couple of quick points before we get started. And first and foremost, we encourage engagement and involvement in these sessions. Sometimes there's a formal presentation at the beginning, so we do ask for that to be complete before we get some questions. But this evening is certainly meant to be far more of a conversation with Dr. Hennessy. So please think about questions that you have. If you are more comfortable listing them in the chat function, I will keep an eye on the chat and ask your questions for you if they're listed there. But by all means, you can raise your virtual hand if you would like to ask the question yourself. And also you can engage your video and raise your actual hand if you'd like to ask a question. So any of those options are available to you. If you are not engaging, though, we ask that you keep your camera and your your audio muted. We're often not aware of our background noises. And so at any point in time, as I say, please feel free to ask your questions. And finally, we've entered all of your names into a draw. So we will be sending some lucky winner on top of all the great stuff they will get from this session this evening. We'll be sending out a gift as a thank you for attending to one of our lucky attendees. And I'll let you know that at the end of the session. So that's our hooker to keep you involved. So it's my pleasure. As a 24-year employee of Acadia University, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our 17th President and Vice Chancellor, Dr. Jeff Hennessy, also who happens to be class of 1999. An accomplished leader with a deep-rooted connection to our campus, Dr. Hennessy was the director of the School of Music from 2007 to 2013. Under his leadership, he spearheaded innovative music curriculum initiatives that contributed to a remarkable 30% surge in department enrollment and enhanced its national reputation. Furthermore, he served as Dean of Arts from 2014 to 2019. He was instrumental, I'm sure that was indeed intended word used to use, in leading Acadia's response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, paving the way for the university's decolonization strategy. Before assuming his role at Acadia, Dr. Hennessy recently served as interim president and vice chancellor and was provost and vice president academic and research at Mount Allison University in 2020, or since 2020 rather. In this capacity, he also acted as the chief transition officer during Mount Allison's presidential search. During this time, he also served as chair for both the Maritime Province's Higher Education Commission and the Maple League of Universities. Regarding academic accolades, Dr. Hennessy holds a Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Toronto, a Master of Arts from the University of British Columbia, a Bachelor of Music from Acadia University, and a Bachelor of Science from Trent University. And as an accomplished musician, Dr. Hennessy ardently believes in harmony and collaboration, values he brings to his position at Acadia. His inclusive approach invites everyone to join him in fostering excellence at Canada's premier liberal arts institution. Welcome, Jeff, and thank you so much for agreeing to chat with me and with us this evening. And this is your first of many Meet the Presidents, President events that you'll be attending around the globe in the next little while, with your next one in about 2 hours in Calgary. So we will be sure not to keep you over time with our conversation here. So folks, you know, Dr. Hennessy and I chatted about questions that I would be asking him here this evening, but some will be new to him. You know, I can't show my whole hand.
You didn't tell me that.
And additionally, I remind you to please ask your questions. So before we get started in the formal questioning, Jeff, I have to ask you, or maybe I'll just say to you, Wordle in 3 today, and yesterday I got it in 2. So I'm just wondering how you fared.
4 today, 3 yesterday. So, you know,
all right.
Thanks for asking though.
I will continue to ask that. It's my daily enjoyment.
I don't see you asking very often when you get it in 6 or something. I don't hear from you then.
Well, that's because I don't get it in 6. So we have just had a couple of new additions. So for folks who are joining us, just as an ask and a reminder to have you disengage your camera and your microphone when you get a moment. So, Jeff, I'm going to start just by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself, a completely open-ended question about how you got to where you are with us today. Tell us anything that you care to share with us about you as a person, and as I say, how you landed as our 17th president.
Thanks. Well, that's a story. I've had a connection with Acadia really since 1995. Even before that, I went to high school in Annapolis Royal, so I was in Nova Scotia during my youth. My dad was a military person, so we moved around the country. He's actually in Calgary now, so he's going to go to the event tonight, which is pretty cool. He's really looking forward to that. But then I had a bunch of friends that all my friends in high school wanted to go to Acadia. It was kind of the place to go out of high school when I was in Annapolis Royal. So I, of course, decided I'm not going to Acadia. And I went to Trent University to do science and really enjoyed that. I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor, but I spent a lot of time while I was supposed to be in the labs working on science, playing gigs or, practicing piano. And I sort of realized at the end of it that I had given up a piece of my life that was really important, which was music. So I came to Acadia after that. After all my friends had graduated, I came to Acadia in '95 and did my my music degree at Acadia. And then left, decided to do a master's at UBC, came back halfway through that because my old professor in music was retiring and he asked me to come back and finish off his classes in the winter term. And then as soon as I taught my first class, I kind of knew what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be a music professor. So I ended up leaving Acadia again, went to University of Toronto, came back again, and eventually a full-time position came up, and it was a professor in the music school, but it was also tied up with the director of the School of Music position, which was kind of a challenge since I'd never really had a career job at that point. I'd been playing a lot of gigs, and I'd certainly had some contract teaching at Acadia. But I applied for it and ended up getting the job. And because I knew the school really well, I was able to work with the people. I mean, some of the professors there were professors of mine just a few years previous to that, and I was now their director. So it was a pretty strange, but also pretty valuable situation. Did that for 6 years, then decided I was going to be a professor again after that. 1 year after the year after that, I finished that. The interim dean of arts position came up. I got asked to do that. I originally said no, and then I got convinced to do it for a year. That turned into 5 years. And by that point, I really was kind of hooked on university leadership. And so that's when this position came up at Mount Allison after that, and in the provost position. And so I left for 3 years, which was heartbreaking to leave Acadia, but it was a good thing for me. I was able to experience another university, look at the university from that perspective. And then I never thought in a million years I'd be coming back to Acadia as the president 3 years later, but the position came open, and I'm very, very grateful that I got it. So that's what brings me here. I've been on the job for 2 months now, and it's been wonderful.
You say it's hard to leave, but once you leave, it often makes it better to return.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm gonna ask you a little bit more about that in a little bit. You originally said no to the Dean of Arts. Why was that?
I was really, I thought, I'd done my time in administration, and I really loved teaching, and I loved playing music. I still do that. I had gone to Indonesia. I was on a sabbatical, so I'd gone to Indonesia for a research trip. I had a bunch of field work that I was going to bring back and turn into some publications and things. And I was kind of thinking, I've done my admin stint. But the Dean of Arts at the time, Bob Perrins, was becoming the acting vice president academic, and he's very convincing. So he said, "Yeah, just do it for a year, and then you can, then you never have to do it again." And then once I was in for a year, it ended up being 5, which turned out to be great.
And the words you used, Jeff, where you were hooked on university leadership. Is there any sort of one pinpoint that you can share with us that led to that being hooked on university leadership?
Yeah, it's interesting. You would think it would be things that were super successful. So we had some successes in music, and we did some things when I was Dean of Arts. But often I found it being exhilarating when we were kind of in trouble spots, and you had to kind of work your way out of them, whether they were just things that cropped up, whether there were enrollment issues. We had some financial issues back then, and I got used to being in the room trying to problem solve. And once you're, for somebody like me, once you're in that room and when the decisions are being made and the problems are being solved, it's kind of hard to leave it. I did leave that before I went to Mount Allison. I was a professor of music again for a year at Acadia, which was wonderful, and I got to teach again. But I missed being in those conversations, and so I realized then that's kind of what I do now.
I have a question, and it may sort of sound a little bit like a leading question, but I'm going to do it anyway. When you say that it's exhilarating when you are met with trouble spots or troublesome spots, I know you've got a bit of a military background. Do you think that helped pave the way to being able to conduct yourself in those difficult situations?
Yeah, interesting. So my dad was a military officer, and we grew up on military bases. That's why I came out to Nova Scotia in the first place, and that's why they're in Calgary now, because they got posted back here. And the thing that I always, I was observing. My dad was a senior officer, and he was always surrounded by other senior officers, and I got to see leaders, and he talked to me a lot about leadership, and some of the stuff that was happening, the more interesting kind of messy stuff, and always kind of ingrained that into me, that was a noble thing to do, was just to be a leader. And if there was some problem that needed to solve, you should pick it up and and get in there and try to do that. So that's a direct connection, I think, to where I am now. Now the approach to being a president, very different than the approach to being a colonel like he was, but still some of those same problem solving and analyzing data, working with people, trying to motivate people is very similar.
Absolutely, and confidence. So you said 2 months, about a week ago, I think you were still counting the days. So I think you've moved from days to months, but how have your first 60 days been for you in the position of president? What are some standouts for you in the last 60 days?
Yeah, I think it's 2 months as of tomorrow. I will have been on the job, and it's just been a lot of fun. It's been a wonderful experience so far. I've spent the first 2 months trying to get out as much as I possibly can around the campus and around the town, going to events, going to a lot of sports. My wife, Erin, who's never been a big sports fan, now goes to volleyball and basketball and football and rugby and hockey with me, and she's really enjoying that too. Going to faculty lectures and events, and I actually went to a bunch of classes too. I went to metabolism class and a biology field lab, but I've been to a communications class and an intro psych class, an intro psych lab, a jazz history class, and it's just been wonderful, just getting around and seeing what's going on, listening to people, and getting their sense of where they think we are and where they think we should do. So it's really been a privilege. Now I'm getting the opportunity to get out a little bit and talk to some people externally. So these are my first sort of external engagements that I've been doing. So I'm doing this session with you all, which I really appreciate you all taking time out of your day to come and listen to me, which is extraordinary to me. And then later on, a couple hours from now, I'll be here in Calgary, and then tomorrow in Vancouver, and then a few weeks from now, we're doing Toronto and Ottawa and Montreal. And that's wonderful too, getting to meet people who have been so instrumental in the history of Acadia and helping us build and sustain such a wonderful university. So I'm having the time of my life. I'm really honored to be in this role, and so far everybody's been kind to me, and I haven't broken anything yet. So so far so good.
Well, for those of us who have been watching you for the last 60 days, we do want to say to you, pace yourself, because we need you to stick around for a while. I'm just going to press pause for a moment with you, Jeff, if I may. Wayne, I know you're there, along with Carol probably as well. Your camera is still on. You did disengage it for a moment there. I'm just going to ask you if you can do that again, just as I say, because we're recording this session. So that would be great if you wouldn't mind doing that. Thank you. I had the pleasure of meeting Wayne and Carol in Cape Breton the other evening. We had an alumni event in Cape Breton, and Wayne was past chair of the board at Cape Breton. So he may have some questions for you. And Wayne, you've just engaged it again. I think maybe you're pressing the button twice and it's kind of disengaging and engaging again very quickly. There, you're good now. Thank you very much. So Jeff, you alluded a wee bit to enjoying being out around campus and out around the town because you're enjoying talking to people. So tell me a little bit more about why that's important to you. I know you said you enjoy hearing from them, but what is your motivation for being in so many places?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I think it's important to be visible as a president. I think it's important for people to see that you're actually, I mean, and I genuinely am interested in what everybody's doing, so it's a little bit self-serving for me, but it's also, I think, important for people to know that and to know that I'm curious about the institution. And you know, I've got a long history with Acadia, but there's lots of pieces of the university that I haven't engaged with and I don't know all that well. So it's important for me to learn as much as I can, and also to hear from people what they, you know, what their ideas are, what they think we should be doing, what they think we're doing well, what they think we could be working on. I get lots of perspectives and advice, and that's, I think, really valuable. I think, you know, people ask about visions of leaders, and I really feel like, you know, it's important to have some visionary thinking, but it's more important to work with a community to develop a vision for the group, for the institution, and you can only do that if you're going to listen and go out and talk to people. So that's to me really important, and these kinds of sessions do that as well. So.
You know, and this was not a plant in any way, shape, or form, but when you say it's important to listen, just really appreciate one of the places you stopped in was our advancement all staff meeting, and you asked lots of questions, and it was really great that you took the time to listen to the answers. So we appreciate that, and thank you for that. So I did have the question, when did you decide to pursue the role of president? Was it always part of the plan, and why? And do you have any regrets? So you've answered most of that, and maybe 60 days is a little too soon to ask you if you have any regrets, but I'll put you on the spot and ask you.
Well, it's interesting, you know, asking me about when I chose to pursue the role. Around this time last year, people started asking me about it, if I would consider it, because I knew the position was coming up. But I was enjoying my job as provost at Mount A. I'd only done it for 3 years, so part of me likes to finish things. I was able to finish the director of music job. I finished the dean of arts job. I thought, no, I have a 5-year contract at Mount A. I should finish that before moving on to something else. But then my wife and my friends and my dad and everybody said, are you crazy? This is a dream job for you. You get to go back to Acadia, a place that you love. You get to go back and live in the town that you want to be in, that you want to retire in. And you know, I think doing 3 years at Mount Allison is enough, and you should apply. So once I realized, you know, what a great opportunity it was going to be for me to give back to a school I love so much and be back in this town where I'm rooted in and where my friends and my family are, then I felt really driven to get the job. I still didn't think I was going to get it. I thought right up until the very end that they were going to hire somebody else. So I was probably, you know, as surprised as anybody else who was surprised that I was hired. But that's it. From that point on, it became a bit of a campaign in my head. And the only regret that I think I would have at this point is that it took me that long to decide to run for it. But since that moment, I was really focused on doing it. You know, I guess the one thing I would say, just speaking about Mount Allison, is that they were great there, and they were wonderful to me. And I regret, you know, having to leave them early. My son's there as well, studying there. But at the end of the day, this is the place where I really want to be, so I can get past that.
Well, I just spent some time with Carol, who is the alumni, for the folks on the line, who's the alumni director at Mount Allison, and she said to say hello, and she was a little miffed that we stole you back. So credit to you from Mount Allison. Folks, just a reminder, I'm just going to say it again, the chat function is open and available for your questions. So please, if you have something that you would like to pose to Jeff, please post it in the chat function. So Jeff, talk to me a little bit about, sort of more so from your current perspective, not anything from your past roles that you've had at Acadia, but what do you think Acadia is currently doing well?
Well, like I say, I've been to a lot of classes and events on campus, and you know, there's just no doubt about it. The teaching, the programs, the experiential learning is just first rate. We have excellent faculty, excellent staff, we have excellent students. So I do believe we do the small university thing, you know, better than anyone. And what I like about Acadia too, and it's interesting because this goes back to a long history of Acadia, but we have that liberal education model, but we've always kind of combine that with applied learning, experiential learning, and those two things go together so well for preparing students for the future. And I really think Acadia gets that better than most universities do. So I think there's lots to build on with that and to capitalize on, and that's a huge strength.
Absolutely. And now I'm going to flip the coin and ask you the opposite question and ask you, where do you think we need to dig in and start or continue doing some good work?
Yeah, well, I think we could, and again, we have excellent people, right? So the people are a huge strength, and that's what we really have to build on. And some of that is building more of a culture of innovation. And that's not to say that the people we have aren't innovative. It's that sometimes their ability to be innovative is constrained by the processes and controls and the systems that we've put in place to make things happen a certain way. And taking a bit of that off and allowing for some more experimentation, for some more idea generation with the employees will start to lead to more innovation. This starts with leadership, right? Of course, empowering people that I work with directly to have ideas and to carry them forward, try things out. Sometimes they won't work, sometimes they will, but that's how innovation happens. And when I think about what I just talked about, that traditional liberal education model combined with the applied learning, it's interesting. If you think about the history of Acadia, most people, I think, know that Acadia was founded on an act of religious discrimination. There's two Baptist preachers that couldn't get a job at King's College, and so they decided to start their own university, where there would be no restrictions on religious denominations. But what people don't often remember is that those two had very different ideas of what Acadia should be. One thought it should be a complete liberal arts, classical education with rhetoric and mathematics and geometry, all the traditional liberal arts. And then the other one said, no, we actually have to be educating our Baptist farmers to have more applied learning. So things like agriculture and chemistry. And those two things were always part of the foundation of Acadia. And knowing that and remembering that, I think we can do more with that. I think we can actually build out programs where we have lots of applied programs, we have lots of liberal education programs. Getting them to talk to each other more, I think, is something that we can do. And students need to see that connection to the things that they're reading, analyzing, and discussing, and the things that they care about, and the things that will inspire them. I think we also have incredible staff, but I think they're somewhat hampered in responding to student needs too. We have students report that it's difficult sometimes to find the help they need, even though we have the great people. So one of the things we're working on is this new Center for Student Success, which will aim to support students more holistically, provide an outlet for them to feel really supported. We've integrated some new technology, which has been great, but we're going to need more of that. And tech really only goes so far. We have to remove the barriers of access to education and to success while you're at Acadia. So those would be things I'd want to dig in on, even after just 2 months, realizing that that's some stuff that we have to work on.
Absolutely. And based on your answer and a couple of things that you've mentioned, a question for you, you referenced the Center for Student Success. So, if I were to say to you as a professor, as a dean, and now as a president, what does student success look like to you?
Well, one of the things about success that we have to start thinking about is it's defined differently depending on who you are, where your starting point is, right? So if we think about success from the point of view of here's the traditional pathway, and if you meet it, you're successful, that's not going to serve most of our students. So we have to think about where their starting points are, what's success going to look like to them. If you're starting from here and you get to here, that's successful. Even if another student starts here and gets to there, that's the same amount of success, right? So that's why enhanced student supports will be really helpful. Instead of just sort of setting one bar, it's actually, well, what can the student accomplish when they're at Acadia, and how much supports can we put in there to allow them to accomplish that? And that's going to make them more equipped to enter the work world and to have influence over their own communities and their own businesses and their own careers. And that's what we're really all about, is changing lives.
You know, it's interesting that you talk about that sort of start point and then, you know, what that trajectory looks like for students, and it looks very different. We were chatting today in the office about our outstanding I beg your pardon, our student excellence, oh my goodness, student award, Athenaeum Excellence in Student. And our awards chair is on the line, or one of our chairs is on the line, Barb Anderson. And it's a great conversation to have about what, you know, sort of start point and end point looks like for a student, and exactly as you say, you know, starting in different points and success looks different for different people. So it's no good to just have that, this is what the award criteria looks like, and if you fill that, then you will receive the award, right? The criteria is going to be quite different for everyone. The second thing I'd like to ask you about, Jeff, in that answer that you gave us, you were talking about applied learning, and we've just started our nursing program at Acadia. So talk to me a little bit about what you're hearing. What are you hearing on the streets about the nursing program at Acadia? And funny enough, another connection back to Cape Breton, where I just came from, CBU, and working with them with their nursing program. So what's it looking like from your lens?
Yeah, well, so the nursing program is something that was started before I started. So I kind of came in, it's at its very early stages still, but I came in at a significant road into the early stage. And we now have our first cohort of 22 students that are on campus. They're taking their general arts and science courses to lead towards the Bachelor of Science in Nursing degree. And as you say, this is a joint program right now with Cape Breton University. We have that agreement with them almost finalized. The College of Nurses has now approved the joint program. So those are great steps. We have some faculty members on site who are from Cape Breton University who are providing guidance to us for how to set up the program. There's still a lot left to do. We have to build, first of all, the curriculum that's going to match Cape Breton's curriculum so the students can do this joint program, but eventually we'll need our own Acadia version of that curriculum. And that's where I think that liberal education piece can be, could come in really handy, is again, enhancing that applied learning with the more kind of critical thinking learning. And then we need to hire some nurse educators. We need to renovate some space into a lab space. Eventually, we're going to need to build a new building. So there's lots to do, and this is really going to happen within the next 3 or 4 years. Now, the good thing is the government in Nova Scotia is very invested in making this happen. They're the ones who originally we jointly sort of worked together to create this program, as are the people in the region. I mean, we certainly have a nursing shortage in the region. I know a lot of doctors who work in the Valley Regional Hospital that are saying, the hospital can't stay open at certain times of the day because there's not enough nurses. And so there's definitely going to be no problem finding practicum sites for our nursing students. And we have a ton of applications already for the nursing spots for next year. So it'll be a good thing for us. Again, a ton of work to do, something we don't have anything of right now. So we're going to have to build that basically from scratch. But we do have a partner program that's going to help us with that.
It's great and very exciting for some of us, or many of us who've been around for a while and been asked many times over the years about a nursing program. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, Jeff, and ask you some questions about your extracurricular, and ask you a few questions about your music interests and what you do with your time in the music realm. So, maybe a pretty obvious answer, but I'll start here with, why do you play in a band?
Doesn't everybody want to play in a band? I mean, it's awesome. No, so I do play in this country band, the Sundries, which consists of 2 music faculty, a music alumna, and a great guitarist from the region. And we actually formed during I had a 6-month leave when I was dean, and it was kind of an interesting moment where I was trying to decide whether I was going to keep going in leadership work or I was going to go back to doing academic work or professor type academic work. And it was a bit of it's the closest thing I came to having a midlife crisis. Instead of buying a sports car, I decided to start a country band, and it's just turned out to be a blast. It's a great outlet for me to continue to make music. it requires totally different types of practical skills, although a lot of the other musical skills translate to leadership skills. I could be a different person in this group, although interestingly enough, I've become the band manager, so it doesn't matter what I made. I end up having to take over organizing it. But it's a great group of really, really strong musicians, not too time consuming. We play a couple times a month, mostly in the Valley. But it's great for me. I love it.
And I think it's the guitarist actually is a good friend of my brother's from Newfoundland, or my brother's in Newfoundland. So you get these connections no matter where you go. So I'm going to ask you some questions clearly that I know the answers to, but we have folks on the line who are getting to know you better. So what instrument or instruments do you play?
I mainly play the piano. That's what I studied growing up. In the band, I also play guitar and accordion, which is pretty fun. And there are 3 singers, myself, Sarah Pound, who's also an alumna, and she also plays guitar and piano, so we can switch off instruments. And this guy, Mike Reese, is another singer, so we each take 1/3 of the songs in any given show, so it's not too much, not too taxing on any individual person. So yeah, it's great.
Note to self, I will not sing around you. I love to sing, but I'm horrible, so I will save that from you. So what kind, you've mentioned country music. Is that the only, is it sort of country and country only? Do you spread out into other genres?
In that band, we mainly play country and country-ish music. I mean, we play some, Tom Petty and stuff like that, and we play some blues, a lot of blues, and we play a lot of kind of more obscure old country, but also some new stuff too. And but I've played rock music, blues, some jazz. I studied classical piano, and I taught music theory and music history at Acadia.
Cool. There's so many things going through my head. I want to sing some songs with you right now. I won't. I'll save you again, as I say. So you alluded a little bit to this, but I'm gonna pick at it a little bit more about being a musician and how that complements your work as a president. So you talked about a little bit, but just tell us a little bit more and draw maybe a bit more of a solid line for us.
Yeah, and I think for me, being a musician, I've had opportunities to be a soloist on stages by myself, and that's all been fine. But I've always really wanted to be in a band, and it's the kind of the way that I like to approach leadership, is to have a team, not just being the soloist that dictates things, but more about getting the team together to work out problems. I can still make the final decisions, but I like the team to weigh in based on their strengths and experiences. And also, I think a lot of musician skills are translatable. You mentioned listening earlier. I mean, critical listening, deep listening is something we study in music school, and it's something that is so important to this type of work. Also, performing, being able to speak in front of people is not that different than performing in front of people on an instrument. Collaboration with other people, being creative, having discipline, the discipline to practice, the discipline to work on your craft. And learning to get a feel for rooms and crowds, that's all part of the work. So all useful stuff.
Absolutely. So switching gears again here, much like I drive a stick shift, not very smooth. I'm not going to ask you specifics, potentially, about your ideas and leadership and direction in the arena of improving equity, diversity, and inclusion. But I do want to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about why ADIA, accessibility as well, is important to you, and talk to us a little bit about your role as an ally.
Yeah, well, I think it's got to be important to every university and really every institution, but universities are spaces where we really have to think about not only having more diverse voices, which is we're a better university if we have more diverse voices around our tables and in our departments, in our residences and in our classes. But for me also, again, I've talked about it before, we know how life-changing an experience like Acadia can be. So part of the goal needs to be to make that accessible to anyone who wants to experience it, anyone whose life can be changed from it. I know, there was a time, even historically, where Acadia, for example, was a destination of choice for African Nova Scotians. For some reason, we've lost a little bit of that connection, and it'll take some work to get it back. But it's important because we know we can make a difference in people's lives, in communities and businesses and the world. So I've been, I'm still learning so much, and my role really is allyship, but also when called upon to, to be able to work with people to do the work, gathering people together and empowering people to do the work. And I was involved in the Decolonization Commission at Acadia when I was a dean, and that was to me a very wonderful learning experience. I learned a lot about what I didn't know, and I think the approach there was, again, my approach was to do all of the background work, all of the the stuff, the messy stuff in the background, to make the situation, to empower the people who knew what they were doing, and to take leadership and come up with the ideas. And I think that for somebody in my position, that's what a lot of it's got to be, is to be able to put the infrastructure in place, the resources in place, and to set the people up for who know about this, and know what needs to be done, to give them a laneway to be able to do it.
What is decolonization?
Well, I mean, now this is an interesting thing with universities, right? Because if you think about it, universities are colonial institutions. So I often think about decolonization not as a goal, because I don't know that it can be fully realized, but more as a process and even a value. So it really is about taking a hard look at all of our systems, all of our barriers to access, all of the things that we've set up that are really privileging one sector of society, and looking at those and saying, well, we have to change those. So we have to find ways for people with different career paths, different origin stories, different abilities, different backgrounds, to be able to find themselves in the university. And it's not flashy work, but it's really important work to take away, those systems and those barriers that are preventing them from either accessing the work or the education, or from being successful, either as employees or as students. And that's a big part of what decolonization is just taking all of that stuff out. There's a lot of other stuff that we do. We do land acknowledgements, and we do flag flying and stuff like that, which is all really important. But to me, the stuff that's really getting to the meat of it is taking a hard look and saying, yeah, we've always done it that way, and it's really been good for me, but it's not good for that person. And so let's find a new way of doing it.
Really appreciate how you worded that, Jeff, because you're obviously you're right. Universities, by mere virtue of what they are colonial institutions, and sort of from a perspective of staff and faculty, I've taught here as well, just taking a good hard look at some of the stuff that we do and why we do it, and is it really important to do it, and if it's not important to do it, let's stop doing it if it's not contributing to that greater platform for everyone to contribute, exactly as you said, and to be part of their own success, for sure. Keeping an eye on the chat function, folks. Want you to weigh in. I've seen some people starting to type, and then they either get distracted or rethink asking you the question. I'm not sure, Jeff. So in the meantime, we're going to flip gears again. And I mentioned to you that I asked you if you would be willing to do a rapid fire. So and I've got to come up with a better expression. So for folks on the line, what that means is I only have a few questions, and they're very quick. And I'm not looking for Dr. Hennessy to give not much thought to the answer. Just give me an answer. What comes to mind? And I will tell you, it is in the area of music. So I don't think I'm going to be putting you on the spot too bad here. So rapid fire, you ready?
No.
You get? No, you're not ready, but you're willing, right?
I'm willing, not ready.
Right.
Willing.
Your greatest rock influence?
Oh, that's so hard for me to answer.
You're off to a great start.
My greatest rock. So it's going to sound ridiculous, but no, it's not going to sound ridiculous. It's going to make a lot of sense. But I grew up as a piano player, rock piano player, so I learned like every Elton John song that was ever written, how to play them, and so that would be, I have so many influences, but that's a core one for me.
Perfect, I love it. Best Canadian rock band in your opinion? No, sorry, best Canadian band in your opinion?
Best Canadian band like ever?
Yeah.
I'd have to say Tragically Hip.
Okay. If you could spend time with any musician ever, from anywhere, who would it be?
Any musician ever? Well, I would probably, this would be dangerous probably, but I would love to spend time with Thelonious Monk just to figure out what goes on in his head. But I think it would probably not be good for my health, or a Miles Davis or somebody like that. But so many people that I would just love to have met and just even watched.
Absolutely. And last one, most under-celebrated genre of music?
Oh, disco.
This
It's so great. I mean, what those people were doing there, it's just so cool, and everybody makes fun of it now. But I think it's great music.
people make fun of it now. I must have missed that memo.
Yeah.
We have a comment in the chat function from our Vice President Advancement, Nancy Handrigan, who's with us this evening, who is also a School of Music grad, and she's giving you the thumbs up on Elton John and saying that that was a good choice. Okay, so I often get asked, Jeff, what our current enrollment is. When I'm on the road and with alumni, I often get asked what our current enrollment is, and then almost always get the follow-up question of what are we as an institution aiming for, or what would we consider our ideal numbers? And you know, when I get asked this question, I often respond with, well, it depends on who you ask. So right now I'm going to ask the president.
Well, so we're a little over 3,500 students now, between 3,500 and 3,600, which is a healthy number. And the strategic plan that we have now calls for 4,000 students in total. I think that's pretty doable. It'll take some work, and it'll take some not only maybe some program work, but also just some work in enhancing our in our recruiting and our marketing and all that kind of thing. I guess the question that I have to ask, and what we really need to drill down on, is that the 4,000 number is, I think, largely budget driven. So it's a good number to have to make the budget numbers work. The question needs to be, you know, I can't bring in 200 more biology students or 200 more kinesiology students because those programs are just so jammed already. They're very popular. So how do we get to that number without doing that, without compromising the educational value and quality of people in those programs? So we've added some great programs. We've added a new program in law and society, for example. It's already got tons of students in it, so it's very humanities and social sciences based, and but it's got specific courses that are law related. So obviously students who are planning to go to law school are interested in the program, but other students too that are interested in government work or anything to do with the law. So those kinds of programs, those program innovations, I think will help us get to that number without overburdening some programs that are already oversubscribed. We've added an applied bioscience program. Now, biology's got a lot of students in it, but this one will have more of a practical approach, and it's got a co-op in it. So I think that one will be useful as well. And of course, nursing will help as well. But I think trying to think of some more innovative programs we can do that are going to build up parts of the university that have capacity to grow, I think will make Acadia stay the same as it is, but have us a few more students so that we can better budget.
Thank you for that. We have some questions in the chat function, and we'll start with questions from our president of the Alumni Association, Matt Rios, who is on the line with us this evening, and he may or may not have the newest addition to his family sitting with him. It says, hi, Jeff, I have two questions for you. Having worked at Mount Allison, I am interested in hearing what you think Acadia needs to do to differentiate itself from our other sister institutions in the Maple League.
Yeah, that's a good question. And you know, I'm not sure, you know, in a way, the reason we created the Maple League was to differentiate those four universities from the rest of the higher ed landscape in Canada. So that I still think is a valuable exercise, because those four institutions, Bishops, Mount Allison, St. FX, and Acadia, really are the last, you know, holdouts of universities that are focusing on undergraduate liberal education, that are located in rural communities, that are independent of other institutions, that are not denominational or anything like that, and that are public still. You know, there's a lot of value in all of that and making that work. So I still think it's a valuable exercise to be able to differentiate those four institutions from the rest of the universities in this country. And it's a type of university that's very, very well known in the U.S., but it's lost a lot of salience in Canada. So I was the chair of the Maple League for a couple of years, and that was, you know, again, one of those things we're trying to figure out a way to do that. You know, within the Maple League itself, I do think that what I was talking about before, where Acadia has very, very strong applied programs that also have a nice liberal education basis to them. So things like nutrition and things like kinesiology in our business program, education program. I mean, those combined with strong kind of traditional liberal education programs and interdisciplinary programs, I think are what could differentiate us in that landscape. And plus, our co-op program, for example, is something that Mount Allison doesn't do. Mount Allison does some good experiential learning, but it doesn't have a co-op program. It probably never will. And it's interesting how different universities do have different cultures. I mean, that's not something they want to do there. But one thing they do there that's really interesting, and I think this is something we can think about more here, is my son is in a program there in aviation. So he's taking a degree, a BA in sociology. At the same time, he's doing his studying for his commercial pilot's license at the Moncton Flight College, and those are done integrated. So he takes both of those programs at the same time. At the end of 4 years, he graduates with those two things. So programs that we can do with some of the colleges, I think, could be something that could differentiate Acadia as well. So yeah, I mean, a double answer. One is, yeah, let's get the Maple League schools out there in terms of differentiation. But then within that group, I think Acadia already is differentiated in many ways, but we have to kind of really double down on that.
It's great stuff, Jeff, and that's exciting. Interdisciplinary studies has always been intriguing, and we have some courses, that sort of dabble, and students often comment on how liberating it is to be able to just sort of branch out and specifically be able to complement an area of study that they're in with a very different looking area of study. Matt's second question for you is, how would you describe your personal leadership philosophy?
Well, I think I was sort of what I was talking about before. I like to empower other people to do the things that they think they can do. I like to inspire people to think about what they can bring to the conversation, to the table, and allow for that to germinate, and support it and focus it, and then eventually it leads us down a pathway. So I prefer a really collaborative style. Again, I like being in a band, not being the soloists. And that's kind of how I've approached the work from the very beginning, is going in and seeing what the institution, where it wants to go, and then helping it get there. Challenging, pushing and saying, well, are you sure this is the consequence of doing that, and this is the consequence of doing this, and what, where would you like to go with this? And obviously there's some restrictions and things to be able to do certain things, but also, I mean, a part of the job is trying to remove some of those barriers. If somebody has a really good idea, let's try it. Let's figure out if that's doable. And my approach is, and I think we have to think about this at Acadia, but we have to think about this in universities generally, is just never to start with no. It might be no, we can't do that specific thing, and this is the real reason. But we might be able to do something else that's like it, or yeah, that's a good idea. It's going to be challenging, but let's try and find a way to make it happen. So starting with yes, or starting with maybe, and then if it eventually is no, people at least understand that they've been heard and that we've given it a shot. But starting with no is a surefire way to just remove trust and prevent innovation.
Do you parent the same way?
No, it's all no.
Thank you for that, Jeff, and thank you, Matt, for your questions. We have another question from Barb Anderson, retired faculty and head of the School of Nutrition, and now on our Alumni Association board. She says, hi, Jeff. The Alumni Association has an EDI working group, which I know you are aware of. I'd be curious about what your advice on how we can best support the work the university is completing on this important priority, so we can amplify the work we are each doing. How do you see us working together and have fun in Calgary?
Thanks, Barb. Well, first of all, I appreciate that the alumni have this working group. It's a valuable thing when alumni engage with the current realities of the university in any capacity, and this is certainly an important one. And generally, when you think about what alumni can contribute to the university, most alumni, I'm sure you all feel this. You're tied to the university because you had a good experience at the university, and you remember it being a foundational part of your life, and you want the next generation of students to have that same kind of experience. So what we need to do is make sure that that same quality of experience is accessible to as many students as we can make it accessible to. So you know, helping us uncover what those barriers are is important, and that can be in terms of advice, which is a lot of what we get a strong alumni support with, is people who are out there in the world doing this work in other institutions that can come to us and say, you know, this is the way it works out in the rest of the world. Here's some advice. Certainly in terms of fundraising, I mean, we're going to have to do some fundraising for certain aspects of EDI in the university, but a lot of, again, is to you know, trying to support through advice and engagement, and also, you know, one of the things that we really rely on alumni to do is to spread the word. So engaging with different communities throughout the country and pointing to Acadia as a destination, and then advising us on how we can support those students and make it a better place and what their needs are going to be. So so yeah, thank you for this working group, and you know, I look forward to you know, really carrying this conversation forward. We're going to be hiring an associate VP of EDI AR. We have an EDI AR committee at Acadia too, and they're going to do the work to find a person. It's going to be an internal external search, and that person's going to have a kind of leadership role in developing a strategy, and hopefully that the alumni group will interface with that person as well and provide advice.
Thank you for that. And you touched on the Alumni Association and the work of the board, and certainly branched a little into the alumni community in general. And you referenced, you know, recruitment and advising in terms of what folks are doing out in the broader world and the broader community. One of my questions was to ask you, what is your ask of the alumni community? So you've mentioned recruitment, you've mentioned advising, you know, sort of branching out beyond the EDI conversation. Any other suggestions or asks or requests of the alumni community while you have us?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the main ones, right? Just you know, giving your time and expertise and talents, that, you know, things that you've been able to accomplish after leaving Acadia, and, you know, in the volunteer work that you do to be able to provide that advice to us is invaluable. Obviously, helping with fundraising, either as individual donors or finding people in the world who you know, who want to donate to some of the things that we're doing. But I really do think that recruitment piece is an important one, because you're the ones who are ambassadors of the institution and can speak to the institution as alumni, as people who've experienced what Acadia can offer. And, you know, if every alumni out there were to send a student to Acadia, we probably would have no enrollment problems. So that's a really big piece of it, is that word of mouth that alumni do. And we do get a lot of students who come because they knew. Most of the students who come to us, I think, from west of, say, Ontario or even west of New Brunswick, probably hear about Acadia through somebody they know who went to Acadia. And that's still going to be one of the most valuable things we can do to recruit students from outside of the Maritimes.
You know, it's so wonderful being able to talk with alumni on the road as often as I do. And so many speak about, you know, several institutions that they've been to, but they just, obviously the ones who are at the alumni events for Acadia would say this, but they just have a connection to Acadia that they didn't have anywhere else. Yeah. So certainly being able to share that story and being able to share that experience, it's worth its weight in gold. Absolutely. I got asked the other day what alumni meant to a university. I said, well, alumni is the lifeblood of the university. I mean, frankly, that's the starting point that I start from. So I appreciate all of that, Jeff. Thank you. Couple of more questions as we're nearing our time. Funny enough, time flies. So we've mentioned Mount Allison, you know, and how you've spent time at both of these smaller universities on the East Coast, and both in small towns. Clearly a draw for you. So what does it mean to you to live and work, and more specifically as the university president, in the town of Wolfville?
Well, Wolfville, you know, I first moved to Wolfville in 1995 when I first started at Acadia, and you know, back then it's interesting. You were here too, I think. Then, Una, it was a nice town. It had a nice restaurant, and it had a nice coffee shop, and it had a movie theater, and it had a cool video store with thousands of VHS tapes, and you know, it was nice. It was a nice place to live. since then, it's really just, grown and ballooned in terms of, not only in terms of its size, but in terms of, what there is in Wolfville and what it has to offer. And it's a place where I always, at a certain point, knew I raised my son there. We built a house in Wolfville. I've always wanted to retire in Wolfville, to live in Wolfville for most of my life. So to me, to be back in Wolfville is fantastic. And I'll tell you, having worked at Mount Allison, and which is a wonderful university as well, but Sackville isn't Wolfville, and Sackville is harder to draw students to. It's harder to draw employees to, where Wolfville is a major draw for students and for employees, and there needs to be a tight working relationship with town and gown, because certainly Wolfville wouldn't be Wolfville without Acadia. But Wolfville is very important to Acadia too. Acadia benefits from having a strong, vibrant Wolfville with that never seems to sleep. It's always, the students are here in the winter and the tourists are here in the summer, and it's always kind of a fun, exciting town to be in, and it's why it's one of the destination spots for people across the country now to come and move to Wolfville and live there. So that working relationship for us is really, really important, and I want to work on developing more tight connections with the town.
Thank you for that. This next question it's a really, really big one. And so I'm just going to ask it very generally, because we could probably talk about it for the next couple of hours, and we're going to be talking about it as a society and as a country and as a world for many years to come. Yeah, are you ready for this? Give me your sort of 2-minute kind of perspective on artificial intelligence and what that means for educational institutions, what that means for us at Acadia. What have you seen? What are faculty talking about in terms of AI and where it's going and where students are going with it? Just anything. I mean, I know it's a huge conversation, but just sort of your kind of knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah, I mean, it is a big conversation that's happening right now. Actually, we're going to be setting up a panel talk on AI in university, hopefully in December. We're going to get some faculty members who are really working well in this space to speak on it and generate some conversations around it. I mean, some people are excited about it because it opens up possibilities for their teaching, but also it's a piece of the world that we all have to contend with, and so it needs to be part of the things that we teach. Some people are absolutely terrified, and others want nothing to do with it. I don't want that in my classes, or I don't want that in my work, and I can understand all of those perspectives. I think that the thing is that the changing nature of work out in the world is going to change the way that we're preparing students for being able to enter the workforce, and so there's so many dimensions to generative AI that we have to deal with, and it depends on what discipline you're in, right? If you're in a social science or humanities discipline, you're really mostly dealing with the text, generative text like ChatGPT, which can summarize articles for you in seconds, or can write you a draft paper in seconds. Now, there are ways that you can set up your assignments that you can work around that, and it takes some creativity. And so we have fantastic professors like John Sokolowski in English who are basing an entire course on the use of generative chat or generative text AI, and it's fascinating. In computer science, it's going to be really interesting, right? Because AI basically can write its own code, and so that's why I think universities like Acadia are so important, because we're educating the brains behind the artificial intelligence. I mean, it's still machine learning, and we need actual people to be able to figure out how to direct the machines. Certain professions like law and accounting, those professions are going to change because the ability of AI to do some of the things that people used to do. So again, we need to educate students to be able to go into those worlds so that they understand the other things that they need to do to be able to provide leadership and in those industries. So it's a big topic, but it's something that the universities that get ahead of it and that start having the conversations and start building it into their programs and into the way that we teach students are going to benefit from it. It's also changing changing the nature of how employees engage with the institution, right? We can probably use AI for some things that we used to use people for, but we need people for other things that are going to be important in that AI world. So I think it's exciting. I think it's something that we, I'm always excited by. I'm not change averse. Moving every 2 or 4 years in my life to different military bases has made me embrace change. But I have learned, this is one of the things I learned way back when I first started doing leadership work, is that a lot of people don't like change, and they take a long time. So I honor that, and know that there has to be some patience and some discussions before we move too quickly. But these types of things, these disruptions to higher education, to me, they're always exciting.
Disruptions, that's right. You embrace them and move with them, work with them, because if you don't, then, as you say, you're left behind. You say staff and how staff will use AI. I mean, I'm not actually here right now. This has all been generated.
Well done.
Yeah. What I was actually going to say is, back when I started my degree, I'm sure there were many professors that would have referred to me as some artificial intelligence there. But as Acadia did, it brought me through and changed my direction for sure. So, folks, we're really at the end of our time here. A couple of quick things to do. The first thing is, Jeff, I want to leave you with a question that I hope is relatively easy for you to answer in a short period of time. And that is, what do you hope to be remembered for?
Oh, I'm not much of a legacy thinker, and honestly, there have been a lot of great presidents in the past at Acadia whose names are on buildings, and they've been foundational for the building of the university. So I honor them. What I really would like to accomplish is to be able to find a way for this university to be the leader in this country in what we do, which is the liberal education, applied learning, primarily undergraduate, and make that financially sustainable, and have us as the premier destination for that. That's my professional goal. And so if that gets accomplished, then I'll be okay being remembered that way.
Great answer. You did say your professional goal. I'm itching to ask you the personal goal, but maybe we'll just drop that in there as the sort of catch for a second conversation with you, maybe 6 months down the road. Sure. We're going to do a quick draw. Actually, it's already done. I'll let you know that we have somebody on the line named Kelton Thomason, and he was the winner of our draw prize here this evening. So Kelton, will get you something out in the mail, and thank you for joining us. Folks who are on the line, and Jeff as well, to let you know that our virtual event in November will be our book club meeting. So we will be wrapping up our book, About Face by Tony Thompson, retired sociology prof from Acadia. So we'll be doing that in November. Jeff, wish you well in Calgary this evening in front of one of your first, if not your first, in-person alumni events, and off to Vancouver in 2 days. I thank folks on the line. I mentioned our Vice President, Nancy Handrican, Vice President Advancement, and she's in Calgary with you, along with Vicki McCrimmon. So have fun tonight. Thank you for sharing this hour with us. Thank you to everybody for joining us and sharing this time with us and with Dr. Hennessy. And as I say, I hope I can ask you to join us again in a few months' time, or maybe a year. Maybe we'll give you a year and we'll invite you back for a check-in. So thanks, everybody, and thank you, Jeff. Take care and travel safe.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming, everybody.